Jesus said that woman that dropped the widow's mite, because her motive is right, her intention was right, and she was given based on what she can afford. Love is costly. Love has a price, and we can all afford love when our conscience is right. I'm going to repeat that again. Love is costly. Love has a price tag. That's what I covered in the last video. It has a price tag. Love is costly. Love has a price tag. But we can all afford love when we have a good conscience. When we have a good conscience. The blessing of a conscience is something that you would see me repeat as we start going into the qualities of love, and as we even cover the rest of the fruit of the Spirit. So moving on to that 2 Samuel 11, we're going to read a story about David. Our God is a God of justice and fairness. So this story kind of lays out the blessing of a conscience. So in this story, this was a time of the year that kings were supposed to go to war, and they were supposed to be at the battlefront. But David at that time had some strong men of war like Joab that could represent him. So David sent his strong men to the war front, and he was at home. So while walking around in his house, David saw a beautiful woman having a bath. And David made inquiries about her, and her fear started, and this woman became pregnant for David. So when Bathsheba found out that she was pregnant with a child for David, she sent a message to the king. Bathsheba was the wife of Uriah, a soldier that was fighting at the war front. So David wanted to cover up the sin. David wanted to cover up what just happened. So David sent a message to the war front and told the general to send Uriah home. So his plan was that he was going to let Uriah come home so that they can wrap the pregnancy around Uriah. So when Uriah came home, after the first night, he didn't go home. The second night, he was staying at the palace instead of going home to be with his wife. David approached Uriah. Why are you not going home? You're supposed to go home and enjoy. Uriah said, I can't be enjoying with my wife and my family when the whole Israel and the ark of God is at the war front. A man with a conscience, with a good motive, and a right intention. So Uriah didn't take the bait. So David thought of another thing to do to Uriah. So when the man was leaving, David gave him a letter to give to the commander. And in the letter, it was a suicide mission. David said, put Uriah at the strong part of the war. David killed Uriah because he didn't want to confess that he had impregnated the wife. He didn't want to own up to his sin. The lust of eye, the pride of flesh, the lust of the flesh is an enemy of the love of God, is a detriment, a killer of the fruit of love. I mean, David was just being human. Just like any of us, we're trying to cover up our weaknesses, trying to cover up our mistakes. Uriah was thrown under the bus. And then if you move on to that chapter 12 of this story, we'll see how God sets the stage and resets David's conscience. Because when it comes to the way we treat others, we can only treat others as good as we treat ourselves. In that chapter 12 of 2 Samuel, it said, and the Lord sent Nathan unto David, and he came unto him and said unto him, there were two men in one city, one rich and other poor. The rich man had exceeding many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing, save one little lamb, which he had bought and nourished up, and he grew up together with him and with his children. He did eat of his own meat and drank of his own cup and lay in his bosom, and was unto him as a daughter. And there came a traveler unto the rich man. And guess what the rich man did? No, at this point, David was paying attention to the story. He said, this rich man spared to take none of his own flock, but he went to go and take one of the flock of the poor man to dress for his visitor. Oh, when David heard that, he was angry. Do unto others the way you want them to do unto you. David was pissed. He was angry. He said, who would do that in this kingdom? Sometimes it is easy for us to judge until we put ourselves in the situation, in the analogy. What Nathan did here was a conscience that drives you into the place of reasoning your motive, your intention, and assessing whether it is coming from the place of love or hate. David was reacting, and Nathan said to David in verse 7, he said, you are the man, my king. You are the man that the God anointed king over Israel, that I deliver you out of the hand of Saul. I gave you all of these things. I gave you your master's wife. I gave you all this blessing. If that was even too little, I will give you more. Why would you have done this evil in my sight? David was a man that God loved so much, but that didn't spare him from the judgment and justice that needed to be served for killing Uriah. If you go on and to read that story, God said, now the sword will not depart from your house, because you have despised me and you have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. He said, thus saith the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house, and I will take your own wives before your own eyes and give them to your neighbor, and they will lie with your wives in the sight of this sun. What you have done secretly, I will do this thing before all of Israel. And David said unto Nathan, I have sinned. I have sinned. A contrite heart. I have sinned. David said, create in me a new heart, O Lord. Restore your right spirit within me. A good conscience is a contrite heart. A good conscience is pricked when they are called out and when their sins are called out. David said, God, forgive me. I am but a child. I am little. I am still learning. Please, God, forgive me. And Nathan departed. Yes, that affair with Bathsheba led to the birthing of a son. David was pricked, was sad, he was fasting and asking God for forgiveness. At some point, the baby that came out of that affair died. David stopped fasting. His conscience cleared a little bit, but that didn't take away the consequence and the judgments of his sin. When we think about the fruit of love, our heart that can assess what is good, what is bad, what is right is important. In the way we interact in our marriages, in the way you interact with others in your neighborhood, in your church, having a conscience that is void of sin is important. A conscience that is void of selfish intention is important. We need to recognize that conscience, motive, and intention are the building blocks of love. Because our actions are judged based on the motive. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, with all of your strength. Means that the love touches our physical strength, love touches our soul, love touches our mind, love touches our hearts. And conscience is how love touches every part of our body, of our life. A good conscience is a blessing. There's a story that I just want to share with you, talking about good conscience. I've been working in this fruit of the Holy Spirit study, and I've been intentionally praying about applying it to my life. So I found myself in a situation where I had to ask my husband to help me drop off the kids at church for their youth fellowship. So I was running by hand. I left work late. I was running by hand, and I called him and I said, no. So I was running by hand. I left my work late. I was driving from downtown Minneapolis, and by the time I make it home and pick the kids to drive to church, we're going to be late. So I texted my husband while walking to the parking lot, please, could you help me drop the kids at church? So on my way while driving, I called him just to check if he was able to do that. So I said, are you able? So here is the conversation that happened between myself and my husband. So I said, are you able to help me drop the kids for youth fellowship? And he said, no. The flesh part of me wanted to ask, why would you? But I listened and I paused and I said, there must be a reason. And before I could ask him, why would you not be able to do that? He continued. He said, because he doesn't have a car. So we now have a teen in our house. So our teen took the car to school. So there was no second car for him to use to go drop the kids. When we begin to see people from their best possible light, when we begin to, in our interaction with people, in our engagement with people, when we begin to think of the best possible light instead of their worst possible light, we will begin to tune into love. At that point, I think of the best possible light of my husband. I knew there must be a reason why he didn't want to drop his kids at church. And he told me the reason. He was transparent. He didn't, we didn't start going into some screaming and fighting because we were open with our intention, with our motives. If we become more open with your motives, with your intention, loving others and loving God will become easier for us. The fruit of love builds on conscience, and we need to start thinking of others in the best possible light. In the best possible light. Think before we jump into the worst conclusion, before we make assumptions, and we think of the worst assumption around their motive. Let's go back to think in the best possible light. It takes practice. It takes the grace of God. It takes the help of the Holy Spirit. And I pray the Lord will help us to grow in love. Thank you for watching. And if you have not subscribed to this channel, please join us by hitting the subscribe button. See you in the next video. God bless you. Go and win. with love, of course.